Cool. All right, Nicole, I think what we need to do is hear your story, because I think that it's your story that's impacted on everything else that's come subsequent to that. I am somebody, and I think we need to find out what sort of a somebody you are and why this all started in the first place. Tell us your story. You were born and brought up in your early years here in South Africa, and then you went to the States. When, why, and how?
I moved when I was 11 years old. Not sure what year that is now. I'm not very good with dates. But I moved, I talked to my family, to my parents about it later on and asked them why. And the answers that my dad specifically gave was to give us more choices, my sister and I. But I know part of it was also crime. And so a lot of the reason that I ended up moving back in my early 20s to South Africa from the US was to do something to give back to the country and realizing that, yes, I had more choices, but I ended up making the choice to come back.
So you were 11 years old when you went to the States. Whereabout did you go, and how did it feel? Can you remember?
Oh, it was so horrible.
Oh, yes.
It was just, it's one of those things when you're a little kid and you move away from your home and your cousins and your everything that feels familiar, it's a very hard thing. But it also really, really created me the way, made me who I am. Because I had the opportunity to see things from an outside perspective. This country, also the US, you always live on the edge once you've moved, I think, in certain ways.
How did you respond to the other kids around you? Because it's young people that you're dealing with now with I Am Somebody. How did it feel going to school there, you with your funny South African accent, and the other kids?
You've got it right. That's exactly it. Tomato, tomato, yes, literally. Yeah. It was hard, but it also is something that formed me. The questions I got about South Africa is one of the reasons that I'm passionate about storytelling. Because people asked, someone called me a racist pig. I still remember that moment. That was someone who knew a lot more about South Africa than other people, actually. The idea of Africa was HIV, AIDS, and war. And so a lot of what made me passionate about stories was wanting to share stories about people in Africa so that people in the US could see that there's real people living here.
What did you know about South Africa? Because from what we hear, it's not every American who knows a lot about South Africa. They maybe know about Africa, but maybe not South Africa with all its complexities. Yeah. And I'm thinking all those years ago, we would have been freshly out of apartheid.
Yeah.
Not that long ago, you're not that old, but long enough ago for it to have been quite fresh in people's minds. What did they know, and what did you know? What did your parents told you? What were your own impressions of South Africa?
Well, I didn't know that much. And as I started to work with other people's stories, actually in high school, I was collecting stories, started several clubs and a project where people were hearing stories about people from Africa. As I was working with those other people's stories, I realized I'm not looking at myself and I'm not looking at my country and my own stories. And the more I dug into that as a white Afrikaans South African, the more I found a lot of silences and a lot of questions. And it's a reason that I believe that we should all be telling our stories because, yes, we can work with other people, but it's really what forms us is the experiences we have and the silences that we live with.
Did it bring up a lot of questions for you then?
Yes, it did. Absolutely. And initially, I put a lot of blame on my family for their involvement in apartheid. And over time, I realized that I was blaming them because I was afraid of the silences inside of myself.
Seems like it's been really quite a journey, and I begin to understand now why you chose storytelling as an area of study, because when you finally survived school, and it sounds like there must have been an element of survival there, you went on to study at a college.
Yes.
And you had a very specific title for your BA, which was what?
Very long title, Storytelling as a Tool for Healing and Community Building. And part of that was drama therapy, art therapy type tools, which I still use, but also how people can tell their own stories. And I did some work with my own story as a performance piece as well.
I think in the States, if I'm not wrong, you build your own degree. I mean, that's not necessarily a degree that everybody else would have done, but you devised it yourself.
And only at this college. I think there's about 2,000 universities in the US, and there's 3 that allow you to do this. So it's really not a common thing. Yeah.
It must have been quite difficult for you to work a very personal story that maybe not everybody would share or understand or get to grips with. How did it go? How did your own journey within that
It was a very hard year. It was my thesis year. I worked on my story. After actually the third year of my studies, I did a field study and worked with body mapping, a storytelling tool. And then again learned I need to look at myself, I need to look at my own story. So my final year, I really looked at what it means to be a white South African and played with the different voices, as well as the voices in the US, different accents. There had been a hate crime that year at my university that no one was talking about. So it was a really hard process, and I would see it now as working with my shadow, with the hard parts of myself. And definitely through that period, I found the gifts also within that. And I stopped being afraid of speaking about it, which has been a really, really important lesson.
The gift also for South Africa is that you devised something called I Am Somebody, for which you have been awarded. We'll hear about that in just a minute. I Am Somebody being what? Did it grow out of your thesis?
Sort of, I suppose, in the way that things organically grow in our lives. But I moved back to South Africa, worked for a few different nonprofits, just finding my feet and seeing what's really going on.
This was
I've
4
been
years
out
ago
of the
you came
country,
back.
for quite a while. And I met Tony Stewart, who's a poet, amazing artist, and we co-founded I Am Somebody to work with our silences, our different silences coming from different cultures. And so we started it together, and it's grown from there.
What was it that you started? It seems like it's also grown. It started as a germ of an idea, which was what? And is it what brought you back?
It is what brought me back.
I want to skip over your
Yes.
reasons for coming back, because it seems like they would have been quite powerful, your reasons for coming back.
My reason for coming back was to do work with other white people in South Africa and to start to speak into the silences that we still embody. And part of that is also to bring people of different cultures together. So yes, that was my reason. And Tony and I met, and it just was a very good synergy in terms of what we both needed to do in our lives. I Am Somebody, the name says it all. It's that if people know that they matter, then they're going to make different choices. And it's this idea that if people are really heard, if we really listen to each other, it's that simple. We can really change things in that simple of a way. Yeah.
So I Am Somebody is to try and get people to tell their stories, to listen to their own stories, to believe in their stories?
And within a concept of generational cycles. So we work with young people, we work with their parents and their communities, and we believe that people will come together around young adults. So we're creating a vehicle for people to come and witness each other's stories and each other's growth.
Tell us a little bit about that platform. How does it work?
So our main program is with young adults. It's a 1.5 year long program. The young adults are 18 to 25 years old and again come from totally different backgrounds, privileged and underprivileged. And it's a rites of passage program. So they're marking a change in their lives, doing some of the shadow work that I was doing in my own life as well. And it's nature-based. So often, regularly, they're witnessed for the stories and the experiences that they've had and the steps they're taking in their lives. So that's our main program. And around that, we have other programs like mentorship, community building, and a network with other organizations. And all of those are just different elements to bring people together to witness each other.
When you talk about working with our shadows, with our silences, but working with our shadows, it sounds like there's quite a lot of confronting of things that you don't necessarily want to confront. How difficult is that for young people?
Oh gosh, we just had our West camp, which is the West is the space of shadow, and if you work with rites of passage terminology. And it's really hard work because you have to look at yourself in the mirror and you have to see the things that are really, really hard to see and, that really aren't your fault, but that you really need to acknowledge and own and deal with. I think it's probably the hardest work we can do, but I also think that we're more alive when we do it and we're more at peace when we do it.
These young people, it's an 18-month program, the Rites of Passage program, and I think it incorporates a number of camps, mentorship. 4
camps that are 5 days long, and then lots of mentorship and also several workshops.
So it's a big commitment for the young people undergoing it. Yes. How do you choose them?
Well, we do open enrollment. We also send it out to organizations, but we felt it was really important that people self-select, not that they someone else says you should be doing this. So they're already leaders. They're doing incredible work in their communities already, and this is something they're doing alongside their ordinary lives.
And the mentorship program, and in fact, I think you were just about to launch the mentorship program.
Yes, we're already doing mentorship, but this is our mentorship program where we're training and starting to build specific kinds of mentorship relationships. And we have our program of a kind of introduction and also just a story circle, dinner, that sort of thing, which is open on November 1st, I think it is, at 5:30 p.m. At Novalis Ubuntu Institute.
So are you looking for people to mentor these young people, or are you looking to turn these young people into mentors themselves?
Both.
Or both?
Actually, it's part of the listening. We were going to just look for mentors for the young people, but some of them, the young people, wanted to do mentorship themselves. And so we said, well, why not? Obviously, you're always giving and receiving. You always have a lot to bring as well as a young adult. So yeah, so it's an introduction, and also true to the way we work. It's an opportunity for people to just talk about what mentorship has been in their lives, receiving it, giving it, whatever. There's no real commitment you have to make to come to that. It's more of a how to find out more.
I suppose the most important thing, or one of the most important things, that these, and there are 10 young people in the programme, is that they're all very different. They're all coming from very, very different places.
Yeah.
How has that gone? Have they all got along, as they say, or have there been some interesting exchanges coming out of this?
Yes, they do get along, and there's always challenges when you have a group of people doing hard work together. But I have gotten a lot of feedback from them that it's been the first time they've actually spent time or felt really close to people from different backgrounds. And just learning, from someone who's had a lot of opportunities and choices, learning from someone who really hasn't had a lot of access. There's a lot of things you learn about yourself when you just witness someone else's story.
Mm-hmm. Ironic, isn't it, in this rainbow nation of ours, that for some of these young people, it's the first time that they've had any sort of prolonged contact with somebody who is not like themselves. How does it get funded? Because it seems like quite an intense workshop. There's obviously quite a lot of money going around here, and aside from the commitment from both yourselves and the kids themselves. But how is it funded then?
So we're really wanting to try some new strategies, because funding is pretty hard at the moment in South Africa and the world. We have a partner exchange network that we're very excited about, where we are exchanging resources with other organizations, and so we don't need any money, and that actually covers 40% of our program costs. So like actual exchanges, like transport for giving a workshop to someone. So that's one of our methods. The other is that we've just had an incredible amount of support from the community, individuals who've pledged to donate every month, and we have events and people come to the events. We've had artists donate their time for those events. So we've got a lot of different strategies, a few grants as well, but a lot of our support is coming from the community.
You might have to give us the website, but I'm sure people will be very interested to know how you've managed to create something out of absolutely nothing. But it's part of the journey, I would imagine. And exactly. I think that your exchange expands overseas as well. I think you've got some links still back in the States. Yeah,
and we're actually going to be building a living storytelling garden if anyone's interested in being involved. Putting our stories into a physical permaculture garden at Novalis Ubuntu Institute so that we can start to share those stories, and that involves an exchange from the US as well.
When is that happening?
That's happening in April next year.
So if anybody would like to come and exchange perhaps the sweat from their brow and their labour and help you build the permaculture garden, it will be a way for everybody to get to know one another, but also a place in which people are going to be able to stand and tell their stories.
Exactly.
We started off with your story. I'd like to conclude with your story, because your story has you've been named as one of the Youth Action Net's 20 Global Laureate Fellows. What does that mean?
That's a long name.
Congratulations.
Thanks. It was an amazing experience. It's a year-long fellowship, and they select people. I think this year was 16.
Is this an American organisation, an international organisation?
It's international, I think. It's definitely based in the US, but they've got national programs, and then they've got, this is their kind of key program, is this global fellowship. Where they support us, they helped us with some design thinking and different strategies, but they also help us get publicity and just support the work that we do. So they people from all over the world doing innovative solutions, so many different kinds of things.
And hopefully networking.
Yeah,
so that's a milestone. It's a wonderful milestone along the journey. Where are you going with this, with I Am Somebody? Is it something that you see long term? Or at the moment, are you just looking at what's happening right now?
No, it's definitely need to be doing long-term thinking as well. I think that's really important. We're really wanting to build resilient, integrated community, and we believe we can do that through storytelling and using storytelling in a new way, kind of building on the history of storytelling in this country. So we're wanting to expand nationally. Obviously, we're doing some exchange internationally, but it's really about seeing how we can build stronger and more integrated communities in the long run.
Are you looking for partners elsewhere in the country?
Absolutely.
How can they get in touch with you?
They can email me at yesiamsomebody@gmail.com. And they can also visit our website. There's also a link there to our blog. Our website is www.iamsomebody.co.za. And our blog linked on there has lots of updates and photos and things.